was devastated. We were absolutely devastated. And I can't overemphasize that enough. I mean, our day-to-day life was in complete disarray, shambles. And I had no idea how it was gonna get fixed. I mean, I had no idea. It's kind of like, you look at the mountain from where you're at and wonder how you'll ever make it to the top. I had no idea how the Lord would fix what he had allowed to happen. This is Heart of the Father. I'm Brian West, and this video today is about the small, unseen steps. It's meant to be a video of encouragement at a time where it feels like there's no movement, where you can't imagine how your life could ever be put back together again. And so I want to talk in this video about my own experience and what that was like, and where I was able to see those small steps of healing. Like I said in the opener, when I lost my son, there was 3 days of just nonstop trauma. I was driving back and forth from hospitals that were about 2 to 3 hours away from each other. One to see my wife, who almost died, and one to see my son, who was on complete life support, as the doctors were evaluating. And I had to go back and forth while still having my daughter at home. And after that time was over, when my wife and I decided we would allow our son to pass naturally, we got back home, and it was this, as I said in another video, a new reality. A new reality. I was there at the house. I mean, there's no words. And many of you are in the middle of this right now. And one of the big reasons I do this channel is so that people understand there's people out there who know what this is like to some degree. But I was so broken. Like I said in one of my other videos, I was operating on muscle memory. I had no strength left, none, for a long time. And I had no idea how the Lord was going to fix it. It couldn't be. I couldn't see how it could be fixed. I was terrified, actually. I was scared. I was terrified that was it. That everything that my wife and I had been so lovingly intentional about in trying to build a family with the foundation of the Lord, to have something functional that would drive legacy and blessing generationally. I thought, that's it. This thing just destroyed all of it. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how he could do it. But I knew he could. I think that was the only thing for me, was I recognized that my limited perspective. And that was just, I don't know if it's just where I was in the maturity of my faith, or who I knew God was. I knew that I had a limited perspective. In fact, that's all I knew. I knew God was good and that I couldn't see everything. That's all I knew in the aftermath of the terrible nightmare. And I just trusted. I have talked before about not having the strength to pray, to worship, to read Bible. I prayed during our experience, petitioned, declared, and afterward I was just fried, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, physically. All I could do was lean on him and trust him with my silence, with my exhaustion. I felt like Elijah in the desert. It's interesting because Elijah actually had his greatest spiritual victory. and before he had almost the lowest point in his life. But he had this huge spiritual victory, and then he went out in the desert exhausted, and he just found a bush, like a tree, a broom tree, I think it's what it's called. And he plopped himself down, and he laid down and said, "That's it. I'm ready to go. I got nothing left." And he lay there to die. I didn't know how the Lord would fix it. I just trusted. I trusted him with each moment. And I think that was the place where these small steps began. The small steps to healing. The small steps to him fixing. And they were unseen. I mean, only in heaven probably I'll be able to look back, and maybe here, as I reflect more on those early moments, these unseen steps of God's healing and, his eventual redemption of hope and peace and joy. But what can we find here? So we see in the book of Zechariah 4:10, "Do not despise these small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin." So healing can start without, dramatic change. God's restoration is sometimes slow on purpose, like seeds sprouting underground. Nehemiah started rebuilding Jerusalem's wall. It began with prayer, small, organized tasks. And day after day, brick by brick, the restoration eventually became visible. And I really love that because it speaks to, that's kind of what I felt like I was trusting the Lord to do, was rebuild our life, according to his goodness. And it was slow, with the support and love of my family, who came to visit and to just be with us, with the joy of my daughter who provided such an incredible presence. And from whatever strength that I had, that came from the Lord, that he gave me to get up, to go, to slow down, to act, to be still. I see those as these small hidden steps of healing. The humility of recognizing I needed somebody to talk to about the experience. And then each of those steps. Eventually, the humility and courage which came from him to go back to church. All the while the Lord is working. So those are small steps. Another example in the Bible is Mark 8:22 with the blind man that Jesus heals, but he healed him in stages in this example. The Lord, partially, so the exact one is he took the blind man by the hand, led him outside of the village. When he had spit on the man's eyes and put his hands on him, Jesus asked, "Do you see anything?" And he looked up and said, "I see people. They look like trees walking around." Once more, Jesus put his hands on the man's eyes. Then his eyes were opened and his sight was restored. So this is an example of how Jesus can heal in stages. That God's work does and can unfold in layers. One of the reasons I think that when we look at why God works like this, why the slow process for us, is for a couple reasons. I think that it's to build trust. I think that the Lord wants us to take that moment, as Abraham did, to trust in him. Psalm 37:7 says, "Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret when people succeed in their ways, when they carry out their wicked schemes." But this is just an example of being still and waiting. Also to form character. The Lord will take a situation. Remember the Joseph paradox. The new reality exists, and God in his goodness will reform and rebuild us according to the new reality. And one of the ways he can do that is with character. Romans 5:3 says, "Not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings, because we know that the suffering produces perseverance, character, and character, hope." So this development, how the Lord can use this in our character is also for the redemption of hope back into our life, to protect us. This is another way and another reason that the Lord works through these still small steps, not too fast, is to protect us. Sometimes instant restoration could overwhelm or even misdirect our heart. So God grows into us blessings at a pace that we actually can handle as we process it based on what has happened. So, one way that we can recognize and receive these small steps, if I were to speak to these at all, I would say trying to find some sort of daily gratitude, which is impossible. I think I just stopped in my interaction with the Lord. I don't remember really kind of clearly or how long, but I do remember it was a long time. I don't remember praying. If I did, it was just so quietly to myself. I didn't worship. I didn't read the Bible. I literally just trusted God with my exhaustion. I knew he was big enough to understand. I talk in other videos about the pressure to engage, the pressure to, seek this, victory and breakthrough, to move through it. And I kind of, grief and mourning requires its own time. And Jesus wept, and God knows what you're going through. You should please be encouraged not to feel pressure to speed up your process, because, the Lord knows exactly where you're at. And in surrendering the frailty of your spirit to him, the vulnerability of the place that you're in, he will meet you there. He will meet you and he will carry you. He knows your heart. You don't have to stand up and, and praise his name. If you are that broken, he knows it. If you're holding on with not much left, he knows it. He'll carry you. And the small steps of healing will come little by little. If we just lean our weight on him and trust in his goodness. I'm going to do another video on probably this week, actually, on what happens when you don't feel that healing happening at all, when the peace is not coming. We'll talk about that too. But the Lord brings it about over time. And eventually in my own situation, I was able to. One morning I woke up. I don't know how much time had passed. Maybe weeks, maybe months. I don't remember. But I do remember I woke up after, every week or so I would look at my Bible and I would say, I can't do it. I can't do it today. And one day I woke up and I saw it and I said, today's the day. I want to read. I want to know. I want to press in. It doesn't seem like a big deal. It's a big deal. That's something. That's a small step. There are small steps of healing that the Lord walks us through. I didn't want to go to church. We didn't know how to do it. We knew what we would encounter, which was a joyful body. And we were not in that place. And one day, one week, we were able to. We knew it was time to go. It was time to worship. That is a small step of healing. So these small steps are worth considering, no matter how small they are, and dwelling on as a reflection of what God is doing, what He is working. You know, staying in the Word once I was able to was important. The Lord showed me things in the scriptures after I was at a place where He had, enabled me to do that again. And talking about it with people. My wife and I got into some volunteer stuff. I reconnected with my men's groups, my men's group that I was a part of, a couple men's groups, and shared with them some of the things that the Lord was doing. And then eventually I did start praying again and petitioning for my family and praising God. And all of these things were small steps in the redemption, in the healing of what God was doing in my relationship with Him, which affected my perception of everything else. And there were other things as well. Of course, the practical aspect of doing life, where I couldn't work right away. I knew I wanted to. Sometimes I wanted to just immerse myself in work, but I knew that I had to take time and process. But eventually there was a day where that became appropriate. And, it was a difficult day to do that. It was difficult, but that was another small step. And months went by, year went by, and things began to change more over time. As I said in other videos, hope returned to our house, and joy returned. One day my wife and I started laughing. Never thought that could happen again. It's a hard thing to imagine when you're in the middle of it, that you'll ever laugh again. But it does come. And that's another moment of healing, small step in healing. I hope this has been a blessing for you, hearing about this experience and looking at the scriptures about these beautiful small steps of healing that God brings about in the aftermath or in the midst of tragedy and suffering. I invite you to put in the comments below. It could help someone. It could be a blessing to someone who views this video, your experience of what healing looked like in the midst or after. Please subscribe, like, I would invite you, be honored if you were part of this channel and this community, and I'll be praying for you. Thank you again for joining me here on Heart of the Father, and we'll see you next time.